You get a sense of like seeing, behind a curtain and like, okay, this is what it's really all about. But on a higher dosage, you come to realize, oh, there's no sausage factory. There's nothing. Like it's all a construction of your mind.
I'm Ben Davis, and this is The Art Angle, a podcast from ArtNet News. There is an enduring association with creative experiment and psychedelic experiences. More recently, psychedelics have become more mainstream, explored not just for their far-out spiritual associations, but as medicine, as therapy, and even just to make you more productive. How should we think about psychedelics and how they relate to art and art making now? Ryan McGinness has had a long and well-known career as an artist. His densely layered, colorful, abstract paintings have been shown at museums and galleries around the world. He's also long explored world building through his art, expanding his designs into maze-like environments and staging sprawling events and parties. Recently, however, McGinness has showed a new side of his creative journey. He has just published an art book, Trip Advisor, Notes from Over 25 Years of Psychedelic Voyages from Blurring Books. The colorful tome collages together images of his paintings and photos of his studio and life with the raw diaries he kept starting in 1999 as he chronicled his own mind's voyages on psilocybin mushrooms, as well as essays reflecting on what they have meant and mean to him. What insight do these trips offer about art and life? What might you gain creatively, and what are the pitfalls? Ryan McGinness is our guide into the world of psychedelics and art today. Ryan, thanks for being here.
Ben, thank you. I appreciate the aggrandizing introduction.
Well, I guess we'll get into your delusions of grandeur or not delusions of grandeur as we go on. First, for people who don't know you or didn't know you up to this point, tell me about your background and how you became an artist.
Sure, of course. I'll give you some bullet points. Grew up in Virginia Beach, Virginia. Kindergarten through 12th grade, went on to study painting and design at Carnegie Mellon University, and then moved to Manhattan, 1994. Actually, my first studio was right around the corner here on Broadway and Prince, and that was in 1995. And then I was right across the street, which makes this location significant. Studio was right across the street for 25 years. Incidentally, ArtNet started one block away.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, on Broome Street.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Back in the day.
Yeah.
Early .com times in New York.
Exactly. Web 1.0 is exciting time, of course. And,
the Williamsburg, meet me in the bathroom era, all that, yeah. You're known for these very dense pattern abstractions. I think I first knew about your work from your show Worlds Within Worlds at Deitch Projects in, when is that, 2003, 2004?
Sounds about right.
I can see how that might resonate with a psychedelic aesthetic, but I don't believe it was specifically part of the discourse around the art at that time. And this book starts a little before, just at the turn of the millennium.
Yeah, exactly. So that shows specifically, I was trying to express the psychedelic experience with that Worlds Within Worlds model that was in this maze. Actually, there was this maze built of mirrors. My symbol drawings are on top of the mirrors, and you could position yourself in between my drawings forever, and they would kind of reflect.
Yeah, they're abstract, but and they have a lot of detail in them. Was it explicitly already inspired by? I always thought of them as more adjacent to design.
Yes, you're right. That show was actually influenced by the psychedelic experience, although that wasn't really part of the discourse around the work at the time. I never really positioned it as psychedelic work.
Was it something you were trying not to talk about?
Not necessarily, but the work doesn't really fall into that aesthetically, the kind of cliche of what you think of when you think of like psychedelic work.
Yeah, right? Sure. Yeah, there is a cliche about it. And I wanted to talk to you about whether that's a pitfall that you try and avoid.
Not necessarily try to avoid, but my work doesn't really fall into that aesthetic. But it does, like you were saying, I come from a graphic design background, so the work is more about graphics and graphic language.
So we're here to talk about this book, Trip Advisor. Way before it was cool, you had the idea to do these series of I guess, mushroom trips. The first one in the book is 1999 when you were 27, I think. So what inspired that? How did you get into this?
Well, I've always been interested in the mind and how the mind works, and more specifically, how my mind works. And I had studied psychology since high school, and I continued that when I was at Carnegie Mellon. But I knew it wasn't a field I was going to enter because I wasn't interested in exploring other people's minds, only my mind, only my own. And so psychedelics has always interested me, and where that can kind of take you into your own mind. And so I started to study it in earnest. I wanted to understand really whether psilocybin was safe, right? And to kind of like extract the facts and the truths from the myths. And then furthermore, I wanted a relationship with the mushrooms. I wanted to grow them myself and feel good about where they were coming from.
You mention in the opening of the book some of the classic literature about psychedelics, your Aldous Huxley's and your Terence McKenna. Was that stuff that you were into?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Doors of Perception, of course, yeah.
And what did you take away from it? What fired your imagination?
Well, just a curiosity, and these experiences are real, and I wanted to experience them for myself, really. Yeah, curiosity.
Was it about artistic inspiration? Were you drawn to it as an artist in particular, or was it more a parallel path of investigation?
I would say more parallel and more just about what it means to be human and consciousness, and it wasn't any kind of a strategy for art or really an extension of the things I was making, although it did kind of change my perspective of art afterwards. But it really wasn't from coming out of art making.
So tell me about that first trip, 1999.
Scary. I mean, all of the times that I have taken psilocybin at all different kind of dosages, I've always done it in a very kind of serious, kind of environmental controlled way with my wife as my sober tether to the world. And that would allow me to really disappear and gave me the confidence to let go. And so that very first time, to answer your question, was all about just letting go. And it was an introduction, of course, and started me on this 25-year-long journey where I would continue to do more heroic doses, maybe every 2 years or so. Again, in a very kind of controlled environment, never recreationally. That never really interested me. I've always regarded these mushrooms as very sacred. And so I think to do it recreationally, at the very least, is just kind of a wasted opportunity. At most, it's disrespectful. But
disrespectful to the mushroom.
Well, I know it sounds kind of silly, but to everything, to the universe, disrespectful to the universe, I guess, which I know sounds terribly corny, but I've just, I guess, held these mushrooms in high regard and have always approached this more seriously.
And in terms of just the practical, technical stuff, what's your ritual? You have a safe space you're in? Is it a darkened room? You've got your guide there, someone who's tethering you to reality.
Yeah, exactly. No matter where I am, I take very careful notes starting in the morning of everything I've kind of eaten that day.
You get a lot of what Ryan's eaten.
Yeah, exactly. For better or for worse. I mean, just wanted to be complete, right? And then and just a comfortable place. It's usually just a couch. Some sight lines to outside in the sky is great. But for the most part, I'm really just putting my head down and going in and kind of disappearing.
For people who haven't yet read the book, it has your diaries, which are based on notes from when you were...
Yeah, exactly. So I would always write in my sketchbook right before and as psilocybin was coming on, until I couldn't write anymore. And some of the notes just get so scribbled and illegible. And then I would always write the day after or a couple days after. I took very careful notes about what I was having for breakfast and the time of day and my mood and the weather and what's, in some cases, what's going on in the world.
Yeah, although you note in your introduction that you've removed anything that could suggest a specific time period, trends or political figures, I suppose, or things that were happening, which I think is very interesting because it's very Ryan McGinness, taking an object and abstracting it into
I never thought about it that way.
General significance.
Kind of simplifying the narrative just to generic facts. There's nothing culturally specific in my work either. And I always kind of avoid references to pop culture. And that's true of what I did here. I also didn't want it to be tied to a specific time, right?
You say about this first trip in 1999 that it established the themes that come back again and again for you. Yeah, how specific are the specific experiences? And then what are the things that recur over and over again?
The simplest is the corniest, and that's that, like, love is all that matters. And we kind of all already know that, but that's a through line, definitely.
Like it's a positive experience. I mean,
Oh,
so
yes.
is that, but that depends on your mood, I guess.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. But that's a constant message.
Love is all you need.
We all know that, right? There's no real revelation there. But to feel it is something very different.
Yeah.
And to have that kind of that knowledge imbued in you during the psychedelic experiences, it feels profound. But it really is kind of a simple message, and we kind of already know it. But beyond that, some of the other kind of through lines are that everything is going to be okay. It's very reassuring. Everything is alive. Everything is vibrations, and that reality actually is infinitely richer and more vast than we perceive it, or that we can perceive it to be.
Okay, so you're talking about the feelings you come back with. You also talk about the clowns. I mean, tell me about that.
Oh, right. Well, so this is more of a superficial hallucination, but I've seen a lot of clowns with triangle heads and a lot of symbols that I've come out and drawn. So I have a lot of psychedelic influence symbol drawings in my work.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's interesting that you focus on the feelings because I think there's a visual aesthetic of psychedelia, and I think it has affected, as you say, like there's a certain, when you focus in on a psychedelic aesthetic to some of your art, but then it's really more mood and feeling, which is a lot harder to communicate.
Mood
to the outside when you experience it on the inside.
Mood, feeling, certainly the experience of the colors. So I use a lot of fluorescence that can only be fully appreciated in person, right? You can't reproduce fluorescent paint. And then furthermore, they come alive under black light. And that's an expression of the psychedelic experience too. And even, the way I layer and build the picture plane. So you have to see through multiple dimensions in order to get the full picture.
Your ultimate takeaways at the end of the book are about the sort of positive feelings of connection and love. I was interested in a sentiment you expressed in the book. You said, the fear expressed about my mind folding in on itself has been a major influence on my work. What did you mean by that?
In the simplest aesthetic terms, I have drawings and symbols that reflect that fear with quite literally one's head or mind going in on itself. But also there's a lot of recursive imagery in my pictures. I make paintings of paintings of paintings of paintings. And so that's a reflection of that fear as well. And that's what that Worlds Within Worlds exhibition was all about, the world kind of reflecting in on itself. And that's a fear. That's scary.
The fear of getting sort of lost in the layers of reality.
Yeah, exactly.
As you go down.
Exactly.
And that's something that comes back up with you that becomes productive to confront that fear? Is that kind of how you feel about it?
I don't know if it's productive so much. I think it's productive in that the best use of the psychedelic experience is to learn about yourself, right? Simultaneously learning about the universe. It's kind of one and the same. But that's the most productive use and reason to confront what might seem like something fearful, like falling and slipping between dimensions and the world folding in on itself forever. But you're really just confronting yourself.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting to talk about it with an artist to me, because obviously psychedelic stuff is very interesting. This is an art book. It's very interesting and engaging to look at. But at the same time, one of the things about these experiences, and one of the reasons why sometimes they're not that interesting to hear about, right? Is because it's like hearing someone else's dream. Yeah.
I know, exactly.
And and you talk about this in the diaries. The big thing is the feeling of having an experience that's not going to be able to be communicated. But nevertheless, or you're nodding, so go ahead and
no, that's definitely the case. I mean, and that's true of all art, right? Nothing was ever going to accurately reflect where it comes from. Right? Which I've learned in the psychedelic experience, it all comes from this one source, right? And so I'm trying to tap into that source and share it, knowing that it is nothing that you could ever know.
I feel like a lot of the danger of the psychedelic stuff for art is that art does happen in this space of going into your own mind and then going beyond what's expected of you socially or the images you have, trying to invent something new in your own mind, but then also figure out how to express it to others. So I think sometimes when people talk about the bad odor that psychedelia has, it's that it's like too deep in someone's mind, right? Like the translation back to reality has not
Yeah,
happened.
I guess that's the real challenge, right?
Yeah. You talk in the book about specific revelations about art that have come out of this. You write, I saw iconic drawings I had already made as well as future-to-be drawings. It was as if the drawings had already existed and my role was simply to materialize them.
That sounds a little nutty, right? But it's true. I have had this feeling and often do have this feeling of seeing through time and seeing future drawings that I've made and seeing past drawings. And it's just really up to me to materialize them. That's the feeling and the sensation, when in fact, it's just imagining new drawings, really. I mean, it might just be as simple as that.
Yeah.
But the sensation is real and sincere. And so it's bizarre to have those kinds of visions.
Do you think about it as a creative tool now? You said you started sort of more as just wanting to explore it as a freestanding thing, but you've become more conscious about it as a creative experience over time. Yeah.
Well, I think that's where like microdosing comes in, when you want to use...
Which you're kind of critical of.
Well,
microdosing is very trendy right now.
Yeah, and I've been microdosing for years, but I haven't microdosed probably for a few years. I think that's, if you want to add some utility to psilocybin or the psychedelic experience, that's obviously a good way. But within the microdosing community, there's this phrase, subperceptible. You want to take a subperceptible amount, which is like 0.1, 0.2 grams every day in a capsule, whatever. And that never appealed to me. I thought, why would I not want to perceive it? So in my microdosing experience, I bumped it up to 0.6 grams. I do feel it's low grade, but it's super functional. And that's when I've taken psilocybin with a purpose, like a utility, to make it functional. And in some very specific cases, I've been working on like a drawing problem that's more of a geometry problem. I just can't figure out how to do it. And I've tackled it successfully while microdosing. And I don't know if there's any real correlation there, or is more of a coincidence.
They almost seem like just totally different purposes. And I mean, I guess it's the two sides of being an artist too. Like, one is you're trying to expand the world of images, break things, do really far out things, shock people, whatever, do new stuff with images. The other one is, it is a job. You got to like be in the studio, get from point A to point B, like get something in on time. And it seems like, in the difference between these heroic trips and then the microdosing, it's almost like two different directions you're going, right? Like, one is going deep and
one's for dealing with this world and one's for exploring another world. Yeah.
What's your wife's take on all this? I mean, she is she's presence in the book. You have her notes sometimes where you get a sense of the outside as opposed to the inside.
Yeah, exactly. So she was a great note taker, and sometimes she would take audio recordings so we could transcribe those later, sometimes video, and was the best trip sitter anyone could ever have.
In terms of observing this and distilling meaning from these experiences, her documentation of it, do you get anything out of hearing your experience from an outside perspective?
First and foremost, she's a very well-adjusted and grounded person. So she provides that objective kind of third-person viewpoint. And I can ask her, did this really happen? Was I doing that? Again, she has allowed me to kind of really disappear and just be in these other worlds, knowing that she's there, or she could pull me back out if needed. I would never, ever be able to take these heroic doses alone or with anyone else.
What is the dosing?
Like a normal solid dose would be 3 to 5 grams. And I usually try to take like 6 grams. And then on the most heroic dose that's chronicled in the book, I think it's 12 grams, which is just nuts. I remember researching, okay, what's the most, anyone's ever taken? And you can only find reports from clinical trials, right? And I think it was like 10 grams. I was like, okay, I'm going to do that then. I mean, that's certainly not recommended. That was a special occasion. I think that was for my birthday one year. And I was like, that's what I'm going to do. Yeah.
Was that a fearful experience for you?
Yeah, absolutely. That was super dark. On a lower dose, let's call it like 4 to 6 grams, people usually have this similar kind of experience. You kind of feel the connectedness of the universe, and you kind of like see how the sausage is made, and right, this is the true nature
Sausage
of
of
reality,
consciousness,
right?
yes.
Or the sausage of the universe, and you kind of like you get a sense of like seeing, behind a curtain, and like, okay, this is what it's really all about. But on a higher dosage, you come to realize, oh, there's no sausage factory. There's nothing. Like it's all a construction of your mind. Like even what you thought was the psychedelic experience before was just a construction. In fact, there's just nothingness.
There is some notes about your career in the book. You talk about different moments in your career. You're working on the Pace Prince show, and there's some career insecurity stuff in there about I could be doing so much better.
That's always the case. Yeah.
Yeah. So that stuff comes out when you're in those kind of emotions?
If it comes out and it manifests in any way, it's very abstract, but it's usually addressed at the very, whenever I talk of it, it just sounds super silly. But it's a real sensation. And for all intents and purposes, I'm telling you the truth, Ben. But so at the beginning of most of these more heroic trips, I'm talking to or confronted with some sense of an other, right? And for different people, they look like different things. And it's never any one visual for me, but it's more of a sense, right? And so at that point, there's a bit of an evaluation. Of course, maybe this is just ourselves looking at ourselves and evaluating ourselves and telling ourselves, now's a good time or now's not a good time. So my point is, on a couple occasions, I've been told, now's not your time to come in. And then I, usually go vomit up the rest of the mushrooms, and that's kind of an automatic, and it's
now's
not
your
scary.
time for insight. Or
Yeah, exactly. Now's not your time to come
in.
in. Now's not your time. And that's happened a couple times when I have been allowed in. There's a flood of insights, and it's kind of like super download of data, for lack of a better word.
So why did you want to make an art book about it? It is an art book, I'd say. It's not like a utility in a way. It's more like an artistic collection of thoughts.
It's absolutely an artist's book in the same spirit as any other artist book. And I love making artist books. I love making books in general. These journal entries, I never made them with a book in mind, and until maybe toward the last few years. And then it became too self-conscious, my note-taking. So I had to end it, and 25 is a great number to end it. And it was probably at year 23 or whatever. So why make a book? Well, I made the book first and foremost for myself, for psychological reasons. Like I've kind of quite literally
closed the book on it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I'm done with this project. And that's primarily why I make books, for my own psychological satisfaction. So then why share it with anyone else then, right? Just keep it a private book.
It's quite vulnerable. You talk and it's like embarrassing. I mean, you say that. It's embarrassing to read,
Yeah, it's absolutely. It's
your own notes on having a mind-expanding journey.
I mean, yeah, there's a lot of corny stuff in there. I felt like the conversations about psychedelics now is kind of part of the zeitgeist, and so the timing was good. And so there might be an audience for this book beyond just me, my friends, and people who might appreciate my work, like is usually the case with artist book I make. So try to bring it to a broader audience now, as opposed to usually audiences are coming to my artist books.
So you said that this book sort of closes one period of that sort of experiment. It has mutated into another thing, I noted. Tell me about Cosmosis. What is that?
Sure. So Cosmosis was born out of a casual conversation I had with a friend of mine. We're both champions of psychedelics and are interested in consciousness and exploring our minds. And we said, we should start a religion so that we can claim psilocybin as our sacrament.
It's the Church of Psilocybin.
Right. It's like one of those things, conversations you have with your friends over beer, and you're like, yeah, we should do that. We should totally do that. And then next day,
Sounds like a good conversation you have when you're on drugs.
It's like, we should definitely do that. And so she looked into it and came back and said, you know what? It's actually not that difficult to start a bona fide nonprofit religious corporation that's recognized by the government. And that's what we did, and jumped through all the hoops we had to do that. And in the course of doing that, we realized, oh, you know what? This has to be real. For me, I was inspired to proceed with this idea because I love like Church of the Subgenius and Discordianism and other parody religions, right? That were essentially art projects. And so for me, it was like, oh, that's exciting. Let's do the 21st version of Church of the Subgenius. And then we came to realize it can't be a joke. It has to be sincere, in the eyes of the government, of course. And so we decided, okay, so let's do it for real, which really means you have to have articles of faith and a mission and just some formalities. And so ours
real is a legal definition, it turns out, when you go to the deepest level of reality.
Right. So we came up with our own, which are not that radical, and I think certainly reasonable. And now we're at a point where, okay, we've been doing this for a couple of years. We had some events. We just finished writing a book that's going to come out in the spring, and we're going to expand into like a THC-infused drink later this year. But the one thing that we haven't quite resolved, and that's where we are now, well, how do I position this in my art practice? Is this really a project as I want it to be? And if it is an artistic expression, there must be this element of criticism, and it must be a little more profound than just some kind of like superficial religion. So I'm trying to define what that is for Cosmosis, and we're trying to figure out what the kind of brand profile looks like for Cosmosis. Because up till now, it's been very sterile and authoritative and black and white and simple. There's no character to it.
Doesn't sound very psychedelic.
Yeah. And it's not. In fact, it's quite the opposite. When we started to look at, okay, what do other mushroom churches look like? They kind of default to these kind of cliches, and it's very colorful. And it's just, so I said, okay, we're going to do the exact opposite of that. And that's how we're going to differentiate ourselves. And that's also like how we feel about it, right?
It's not solo is what it's not. I mean, the book is about your solo experiences for the most part. There's some social aspects of the encounters explored in the book, but generally kind of poo-poo them in favor of the going inward part of these experiences. So this is you taking the step into shared experiences?
Yeah, I guess so.
More self-conscious way?
And just trying to turn as many people on to not, psilocybin specifically, but to themselves, right?
At the end of the book, you do come to a conclusion. You say what you think the punchline of the cosmic joke is. What is it?
Okay, so there is the joke, which is consciousness and all the different things we do with it in this world. Then there is the punchline, which is that nothing matters, right?
You talk about happiness a lot in the first part of this. That sounds very bleak.
It is bleak. It is bleak. And it sounds super nihilistic, right? But then where do you go from there? And that means you have to create your own meaning, and you can only do things that are meaningful, that you enjoy. So do what you love. And then that's the laughter of the joke, is kind of living this laughter.
Right. It's sort of like you realize there's no meaning, which means you have to make your own meaning, which brings you back to art making, right?
Exactly. That's exactly it.
Well, on the meaning of life, I think is a good place to leave it, Ryan. Thank you very much for talking to me.
Thank you, Ben. I appreciate it.
The Art Angle is produced by Sonia Manalili, with contributions from Kate Brown, Ben Davis, Caroline Goldstein, and Naomi Ray. Thanks for listening, and see you next week.